Given the rise of tension in Donbass recently and the pumping up of the heavy military and soldiers and munition from the Russian side to the occupied territories, it's obviously that the agreements, so-called agreements, are not working. Why I said so-called? Simply because from the legal point of view they are null and void. Neither the domestic procedures to become a law or to become an international treaty has not been fulfilled in Kiev, and that's why it's not legally binding agreements. What we see on Donbass, the escalation from the Russian side for two reasons. First and foremost, to put pressure on the Western partners to get the desirable outcome for the Kremlin. From the other hand, military goals consist of two parts. To serve as a testing ground for the Russian military and their doctrines of the non-linear war, and for the other hand, to build up a military of their proxies to create a long-term problems for Ukrainian statehood. If we are talking about Ukraine, yes, one of the sides of the conflict, but not the so-called separatists, but we consider them as the Russian proxies, and it's up to the Kremlin to stop the war. That's why the Minsk agreements are not achieving its goal for the simple reason they are not addressing the real problem. Why there is a conflict on Donbass? There are two major points why these agreements are not going to work. First, for President Poroshenko, it's impossible to fulfill obligations with regard to the changes of constitution, holding elections, and not to prosecute those involved in the crimes against humanity on Donbass, simply because he doesn't have any substantial support within the parliament, and the general public is strongly against it. Should he has been pressed to make this law possible, it will trigger the conflict and the trouble with far-reaching consequences. From the Russian point of view, the goal of this war is to first and foremost limit our sovereignty with regard to the decision to join NATO and the EU, and secondly to install their proxies into the political and legal system of Ukraine, which will enable, which make it possible for the Kremlin to influence substantially the Ukrainian politics. The reason for that, that the revolution of dignity just made it impossible for the Russians to influence domestic politics of Ukraine, and the only tool they have is the military one. There is a difference in approaches from the West and Ukraine with regard to what's going in Donbass. The West tends to see this situation as a slightly violated ceasefire, while we see as a low-intensity conflict. In Kiev, we have accepted the inevitability of the full-scale war, and that's why we are preparing for it. And each and every movement of the troops and equipment towards our borders, and especially into the territory temporarily occupied by the Russian forces, we consider as the imminent threat to us. That's why it's not the issue of not the issue if, but the issue of when. Certainly, President Poroshenko is trying to find a sort of agreement, and he thinks that the time plays for him. He is trying to mount pressure on Russia with the aim to exhaust the Russian resources and willingness to offend Ukraine. And meanwhile, he is trying to find the compromise with Russians with regard to the settlement. It's interesting that in the recent history we've seen the first time when the United States stepped down from the major security issue of their major ally in European Union. And that's why it's one of the reasons why this so-called Normandy format is not working. The European Union as an institution, and then Germany and France failed to find an agreement with Russia for the reason why, because it's too complicated, and it's not just regarding Ukraine, Crimea, but including other issues like Syria and others. So we see the great game of Russia against the West, and Ukraine is just a tool of this game. Certainly, we are not to wait and to see the so-called leading behind approach of Obama to change, simply because his time in the office is running out, and it's up to the next president to decide whether to support Ukraine more and to step into the negotiation process. But certainly without the United States, it's impossible to reach an agreement with the Russians. Russia is willing, or President Putin is willing, to restore its geopolitical status, and one of the signs of such a status is the direct talk to the President of the United States, which Putin considers as equal and not President Poroshenko, who he believes is not legal and is running not even a country, as President Putin said once about Ukraine. President Putin confirmed that there is an only superpower remaining in the United States, and certainly it will be in his interest to talk to President Obama on different issues, including Ukraine. And since the Russian diplomacy is traditionally known for combining different subjects and different interests into one package, and the Americans are trying to divide them into the case-by-case type. So Putin is willing to talk to Obama and solve this issue without any involvement of other leaders, including those countries involved. It's obviously that the only tool that Russia has at its disposal is a military one, and from the other hand, the only tool that the West has is the sanctions. So the recipe how to solve the crisis will be first and foremost for the West to strengthen its allies, not just in the Baltic Sea, but in the Black Sea as well, where Russia is actively trying to be a major power. Secondly, to strengthen the Ukrainian's ability to defend itself against Russia, including the guarantees of the huge military support in case of the escalation of the conflict, not just in Donbass, but in Crimea. Certainly, I mean equipment, intelligence support, and certainly political support of the West. And it's crucial to mention that the West needed to confirm that Ukraine will be a member of NATO, or should we fulfill any obligations, and the people of Ukraine decided to do so. Because it's a crucial thing for one of the reasons why Putin is waging this war against us. And third point is the mounting pressure on Russia, on its belligerent activities in Crimea, and certainly the war it wages in Donbass via their proxies. We should put conditions of ceasing sanctions from the Russia related to their activities. Now we see that Russia is not going this way. It's escalating the conflict. It's creating the ground for further escalation in the possible full-fledged war against Ukraine.